Welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. Today we analyze the perception or misconception of risk when it comes to software innovation projects. The intersection of financial planning, IT overhead, and evolving demands of the workforce, we break down how to challenge risk with modern technology and a culture of creativity. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. Good to see you guys. I'm excited for what I think is going to be a really fun and interesting topic. There's been some research going on recently within our company that I wanted to expand upon and start to talk about what type of technologies equal certain types of results for organizations, more specifically the CXO suite. But we're going to title this episode Managing Risk in the Age of Innovation, right? And the reason I kind of put it in quotes here is because we're going to go through what do we mean by risk? Is it risk? Is it not? How do you qualify that? But really, let's start the conversation on buyer profiles of today when we're talking about enterprise software or technology in general. So we've been subject to some recent research that, and you guys correct me if you think it's something different, that the buyer profile for a lot of these technologies today are seasoned professionals, primarily the CIOs, that this may be a once in a lifetime type decision to, doesn't have to necessarily be something as drastic as lifting and shifting from one ERP vendor to the next. Could be. That's maybe the majority of what the research was focused around here. But inherently, that sort of decision is very risky in their minds. So it's more about they're looking for a solution that will make sure that they don't lose their job, for lack of a better way to put it. So they want to manage that risk just to make it successful. And therefore, does it stay more tactical? How much can they really innovate? What gets left behind, right? Because it is, I can totally agree with that the thought of shifting to another vendor or, implementing a new ERP solution can be quite a big task, a big ordeal, right? So, and if it doesn't go well, it looks really, really bad on the IT organization. But we also live in an age to where everyone's talking about automation, data elevation, advanced analytics with machine learning, all these types of things. So how do you balance that? That's what I want to focus today's discussion on. So let's first start with the buyer profile. Based on what I've just said, do you guys agree? And has it changed in, let's say, the last 20 years? And Massimo, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. I think that the profile has changed big time, right? Big time. I think that now I call it almost like the Agile CIO, right? And what I mean with the Agile CIO is that just implementing an ERP isn't really enough, right? You take, 20 years ago was like, okay, I embark on an ERP implementation or a major app implementation, do that, and I'm done. Today, the Agile CIOs isn't really maybe only do an ERP implementation, but it's because its innovation is very iterative, and you get a lot of the rhythm and the tempo of innovation is so fast that you have to jump on this wave, right? So as soon as you have, now you have the ERP, then the next big thing is to, take a look at the next innovation. Then when you're done, you jump on the next wave. So if you are not the Agile CIO today, and you just think that one thing is enough, then your company isn't going everywhere. So the buyer profile is today, I would say the successful buyer profile is the Agile CIO that really jump on any wave of innovation. And then we're going to talk about risk. You mentioned risk, which is very important because you could say, well, the more waves I serve, the more risk I'm taking. Is that really true or not? Right. So, but to me, the Agile CIO, that's what the profile is today. The leader that really can jump on any wave of new technology. And it could be an implementation of an ERP or an edge application of any type of edge technologies that surrounds the entire architecture. So I'm voting for Agile CIO, Rick.
That's interesting. So would you argue that that is the profile of the typical individual today, or is that where you see it going, or where it aspires to be?
No, I think we are in transition phase, right? So we have people coming from the ERP, or people. I would say we have CIOs coming from that static, almost like a waterfall type of methodology. Like I do one thing, all this phase, and after 3 or 5 years, I'm getting something out of what I've done. So we are transitioning for those profiles to more an agile CIO that they will do that iterative. And a lot of them will pitch you today that they are doing already. But if you peel the onion and you talk to them, essentially they're not doing it at all. They just pitch it for the internal marketing or the internal marketing project. So I do think that we are in transition. We are also in transition in corporation where the CIO still have not an important job yet. So they most report still to CFO. So it's more like a cost center almost. It's more like a corporate job if you are under the CFO type of organization. Well, they should really report to the CEO and be aligned on the strategy and the execution. Every single company is a technology company today, and they probably have a software division as well, taking software from vendors, but also having their own software division and really innovate together with the software vendor, right? So that is what I think that transition eventually will be CIOs being almost CEOs and be the agile, right? So, and through agile, not on paper, but really through agile.
So Massimo, you said a little bit earlier, we were talking about buying power and 20, 30 years ago, who's buying it today versus previously? Is it the same person? Is it CFOs?
Yeah, so definitely there was not even a CIO role 20 years ago. That didn't exist. There was a CFO with a little bit technical skills. And this profile was buying software and implementing it, right? Now you can say, well, still a CFO will write a check. That's true. But I think that the reverse needs to happen. From a company perspective, CEO and CIOs will drive the strategy, and then there is a finance budget. Well, that will fit into what you can buy, right? So I think that the CFO will be more, serving a service to these two profiles because they are running the strategy and the company, right? But if it is run by, you only can do, certain things because the CFO will run it. Yeah, then you're still gonna be what you're going to do, what you were doing 20 years ago. So one project, that's all, right?
By the way, I have to say, because I fall into this trap, 20 years ago, that was 2000, guys, 2001. So sometimes, like, I still think it's the early 90s when we say 20 years ago. I don't know if you fall into the same thing.
But even 10 years ago, Mike, and 20 years ago, they were busy with the Y2K problem, right? So fixing that problem in the systems. But even 10 years ago, I think the role of CIO now is much, much more important than before. That's for sure.
Well, before it used to report up to the CFO because there was really no leadership for IT and software because it wasn't really a strategy. It was always a cost center. We need the software. Okay, let's hire some guys to run the team, the budget, the software, whatever. But no one ever saw it as a strength. It's, hey, let's stand up an Exchange server for email. Let's stand up this server for whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, now I hear what you're saying, that now this is actually a competitive edge. You can't just have IT and executive leadership reporting through the office of the CFO because things don't work the same way and the decisions are not made the same way for both company enablement as well as actually software strategy and how to actually turn that into a competitive edge. So, yeah, I totally agree. The whole operation of management of IT infrastructure and IT structures in companies is still undergoing that transition where now increasingly, even I have seen, a big change in the last 10 years where now CIO, if there's offices of CIO reporting to, the CEO, the executive, the chairman, the what have you, right? And they're sitting in the boardroom just as all the other CXOs are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Massimo, you brought up something that we've heard a lot of companies, including our customers that we work with, talk about agile development and how they want to implement that in other areas of their business. we'll get to the technology aspect of that in just a second, but I think that notion or that strategy that companies are moving towards, isn't that what sort of challenges that relationship between the CFO and CIO? Is that one wants to iterate through certain things, right, while the other wants to create a budget for the year. Yeah, and I think that's what ultimately causes a lot of this friction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, still, there is a struggle of CFO says, okay, I'll give you a budget for this year because we are running in the world in fiscal years, right? Fiscal years, for 4 quarters. And that's how we run, right? And therefore, CFOs, they say, well, this is your budget for this fiscal year. Well, a CIO doesn't have a year, it could be that he has or she has 3-year plan, right? And going throughout different fiscal years and financial periods. So you have a short term or maybe a much longer term investment, right? So that you get the hit maybe in the first year, but then in the second year, you get the return of investment. So that friction is now there. Take subscription model, right? So people are buying a lot of from the cloud, right? But how did that start? That start by a business team, like a CRM software. The business leader had a credit card. They went, online and they subscribed to a CRM service with their own credit card. They didn't go to the CFO, right? But now, if you want to buy a subscription from a corporate level, now all of a sudden a CFO is faced like, how do I budget this? How do I forecast this? Because maybe people are going to there are going to be 5 people using this, or it could be 1,000 people using it, right? So how do I forecast? And that is the friction you get between a CFO that has to operate in a very clear, a playground versus a CIO that wants to iterate, improve, grow, or even shrink. But it doesn't have a fiscal year type of timeline. It has different timelines, totally different.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we as a software provider, we have to be cognizant of this too and how things are changing because, look, ultimately at the end of the day, we've got to sell software, right? So we have to be aware of how these transitions are happening because it's our job to make sure that our customers can continuously innovate, and that will then that should match the buyer profile of what their goals are. Maybe not today, but maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now, eventually 10 years from now. So Mike, we heard from Massimo that his perspective is this, call it the Agile CIO. But do you think, from your perspective, what do you think the next generation of buyers are? Are they going to be looking for something different? Are they going to look at this as risk in the same way?
God, that's actually 2 questions there, isn't it? So maybe we'll start with the buyer profiles and where I think it's going. But I think ultimately, early days when you did have that sort of more formalized leadership role and functionality, I think it was probably a very small committee of people that were making a decision. Show me the demo of the product. Show me the capabilities. Okay, I'm going to agree to purchase this product and then implement it into our enterprise, without actually consulting with the functional users, with the actual people that are going to be living in this thing, right? So they're making that decision. And increasingly now we're seeing, some companies go through their second, even third ERP purchase and implementation cycle. So it doesn't happen very often. Sometimes, it doesn't happen for 30 or 40 years. Other companies, they innovate faster, they make those decisions faster. I think over time, what we've seen in the last 10 years, though, is increasingly, and Rick, I'm sure you've seen this too, but when we jump on for a demo, a discussion, we're actually seeing everyone from the office of the CIO. And I was just on the phone with a healthcare company a few weeks ago. Everyone from the CIO down to buyers, purchasers, people that are actually facilitating the running of the business because they're the ones that are counting the clicks. They're looking at how usable it is. They're seeing how effective they can project themselves to be. And if this appeals to their sensibilities, yeah, the software looks really, really attractive and nice, but is this actually a positive step in the right direction? Because the CIO, at the end of the day, he has to figure out budget, negotiation, and so on. But he wants to hear from his team. And usually we're also seeing that it's now more committee-based, that, hey, guys, you guys actually need to perform. Is this software going to help you? So I think that's where we are today. And that's where we're going to continue trending. But I think what's going to happen is that with a lot of these new technologies from the consumer into the enterprise space, we're going to actually start seeing that there are actually like due diligence COEs within companies that are focused on how do we focus and extract or create value and identify how to evaluate, voice and digital assistants. How do we figure out how do we actually, turn machine learning into something operational that improves the business? And I think a lot of that is going to start getting down into the deeper levels of the company. So it's just really taking it to the extreme for that committee-based decision process. But I think increasingly, the role of the CIO is listening to feedback. And I think this is also, by the way, a change in the last 20 years of just management that we see, not in our industry, but everywhere. But also that sort of emotional IQ or that dependency on a team making a decision. I think we're seeing more of that and more trust being placed into the people that are actually using this, right? Because if I'm an employee that has to use the software and people are telling me I need you to be 20% more efficient, I need you to do 20% more work, I need you to do this, how am I outside of the process of making that decision, right? So I think that's going to continue to accelerate significantly where the CIO wants to hear that his team is happy. He wants to be part of that process. But more and increasingly, he's going to be working on the negotiation, the strategy, and the enablement of how to turn that into a strength, especially with their board and their leadership, to actually make this a competitive advantage rather than a cost sink.
Yeah, Mike, I think it's a great point. I mean, it definitely before it was a top down. There were 2-3 people making the decision, and boom, that was it, right? And most of the time, there was also a system integrator even involved in that decision, right? Because then the system integrator would have, even the plan, like, okay, I'm going to implement here, right? But now it's more inclusive and democratic in such a way that, hey, if my team is on board, I'm on board too as well, right? Which is really, I see this difference big time, which is actually very positive. But at the same time, we didn't talk about the role of the system integrator when they advise the CIO to buy certain software versus another, right? So there is always, I'm always amazed how a system integrator can turn a company to make a certain decision while the software actually isn't really very suitable for that industry, for that vertical, for that business process that customer is really, needing for that. So I think also CIOs from a profile perspective, coming back to the Rick perspective, there are now more careful to select system integrators. They maybe they have even more in-house people and less third party. And then you have also this third party, like this system integrators that they claim to be more independent, but at the end of the day, you are not independent, right? So it's so funny that if you claim to be independent, but you still do a partnership with the software vendors like us, then you are not independent, right? So you are actually trying to pitch a software vendor to a certain customer. And so a CIO now, I think it's more aware of that, that game that is going on. And if I would be CIO, I would definitely count till 10 before I choose a good system integrator that is really advising me in a good way, because for me and my organization, and not because they can stay forever in my IT department and writing hours and bill hours all the time, right?
Well, I think also this goes for anything. You need to look at what incentivizes people. And if you're looking at GSIs and they've got one badge on there and it says one vendor, one product, one whatever, of course they're going to say one size fits all, right? Mm-hmm. Their expertise is in that product rather than in that business. Mm-hmm. So also, just generally speaking, you should be looking at hiring someone that understands the business, because the product at the end of the day, in a lot of cases for like ERP products, you can kind of swap them out, right? It's a difference of business process and workflow. So you want to find someone that knows their stuff, that is incentivized by solving problems, not implementing a very specific name brand of software, right?
Yeah.
That goes for really anything. Looking at the incentive system chain for literally any decision that you're making when you're talking to somebody.
Absolutely. I was one example I had years ago to a European customer. I knew the CIO very well, but I visited the customer. I was talking to the team for already 2-3 days. I was visiting them, but then I figured out that the people on the team of the CIO team, they were all individual contractors, right? And so all of them, they had their own plan, right? So I had me in the middle as, the platform provider. And then I really frankly had a conversation with the CIO. I said, yeah, this is not going to work, not from my perspective, because I can make, a deal with the single contractors and make, something out of it. But for you as a company, it will not work, long term, because these people are going to be here until you pay them, and then they're going to be gone, right? So this is not a good way to work. You have to put a plan and a team together. If you want to be the agile CIOs, and not only doing one project, but multiple projects, you will need to have a team around you that will support you with that agile, project and innovation. And he changed that. I saw that, throughout a year. It took a year or two, but then he had really a stable team with one goal and not different goals.
Yeah, I do think you're right, Massimo. It requires, we've talked about this in the past, it's not necessarily one person. It's a culture that you ultimately have to go through. And I think I love the way, Mike, that you went from sort of the buyer profile into, well, the buyer profile is actually the changing user profile. That's a really elegant way to put it. And I think we're gonna have to shelve that, because I know our friend Nunzio is going to want to be heavily involved in that. But let's sort of try to elegantly segue into the technology aspect of this, because what you guys are describing when we're talking about agile development and how we're focusing on user profile, I might argue, I think we're giving it more credit. I think there is a lot more still not tension, but sort of call it old school ways of having to balance what is considered risk, as far as, well, we've got to make this $1 million implementation in some cases work. So we're going to only focus on, the high level things, right? And we're trying to get away from that. But let's say we're continuing down this path of trying to get to agile development and focusing on user profiles. I would argue that requires a really modern technology, foundation, right? So Massimo, let me ask you this. Knowing that we're talking about risk from a technology perspective, how should or how can a CIO balance that? Is there something out there to say, yeah, I want to be really innovative, but it doesn't carry a lot of risk as we're sort of changing this profile? What's the technology solution for that?
Yeah. So I don't know, the guys that will listen to the podcast, watch the podcast, and I love comments if people are going to comment that. But I saw a lot of research. There is a lot of research going on, both in the analyst community, but also technology blogs, where people are pitching these composition platforms or, enterprise application platform, right? And essentially what they do, they enable the creation of a business process with one or multiple solutions, and they come, as uniform to the end user, to the business process, and in a different way. It's a really new emerging category in the space. So the good news for the Agile CIO today is, if you purchase software, if you buy software that is powered by this enterprise composition platform, you can choose, the phases of introducing the technology innovation. So meaning you can start with the merely ERP, ERP implementation, but then you already have the platform, the composition platform. So probably you will need already to implement the APIs. You will need some APIs. You will need a single sign-on. And maybe you start to take care of the data and analytics, right? So this will be the base project. But guess what? Now, when you finish that project, you can enter immediately the second phase of a project and say, oh, maybe I want to do, a compliance project. I have the data. I want to make sure that I have all the rules for fraud detection, taken care. And then once you have done that, because you have this platform, it's already there. You can start a third phase. You can say, oh, why can't I do machine learning and do optimization and anomaly detection, right? And then once you do that, then why don't you take the low code capabilities in this platform and build some nice, mobile applications for your business? And so you see this platform that people call in the industry composition platform. If the vendor comes with such a platform, it enables you as a CIO to do these projects. Why is it important? Because you can say, well, I can buy another, I can buy an AI platform for another vendor, and then do the same in the second phase or in the third phase. I can buy a risk compliant. Well, we said it many times in this podcast. If the AI platform is already in the enterprise application platform, it's already wired. So you're not worried about doing all the surgeries and integrating it. It's already there. So you almost start with the project day one, and you finish the project very soon. If you buy an external platform component, then the first thing you have to do, you're going to spend time first integrating. So after 6 weeks, probably you have zero value still, because you have spent time integrating it and taking care of all the systems, integrations, and the security and so on. And guess what? You're not going to be the Agile CIO. You're going to be doing waterfall again. And then guess nobody wants to touch it anymore because you integrate the whole beast together, right?
So Rick, follow up on that, because I totally agree with you, Massimo. But Rick, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts here are, because everything that you said, Massimo, 100% agree. At the same time, how are you shooting yourself in the foot if you're going to embrace everything that you just laid out and then say, but I'm going to do this on-prem, or I'm going to do this in single tenant cloud that very seldomly gets upgraded, or I have to schedule upgrade cycles once every 18 months or 24 months or something like that, right? So like everything that you said, absolutely. But if you're buying into a frozen version of the architecture, Rick, what is the advantage of then actually going like full on, like full throttle cloud in that capacity? If you see where I'm kind of going with this, or what are the pitfalls if you don't? Put it another way.
I think the answer is simple. It's not possible unless you do that, right? And I think well, first and foremost, let's be completely honest here. The majority of the advanced technology and innovation that you're wanting to do, if you find vendors and ways of even trying to attempt to do that on premise, and I can promise you you're doing that yourself because no one's wanting to carry the risk of that cost, the TCO for doing something like that is astronomical, right? So the only way to do this in a way is really getting you to full multi-tenancy, where you can take advantage of technologies like Data Lake, and now your favorite, Mike, the Lakehouse components, if you want to do real-time curated analytics and reporting in conjunction with your Data Lake strategy, and then you want to do some advanced analytics with machine learning and embed that into your enterprise. Those types of things you simply cannot do until you move to multi-tenant cloud, because the TCO will never justify it. That clash that we were talking about from the CFO and the CIO, don't even bother if you're not moving to cloud for something like that. Now I get it. We still go through these debates of, hey, am I comfortable with my data being there? Look, at some point, everyone's going to get on board with that. There's so many advantages to that, and security continues to get, better and better as we move forward with that. But Massimo, one thing that you had said, and I want to give a shout out to, you mentioned the EAP research, and we're good friends with Olger Mueller over at Constellation Research. But in some of his market research, he's been talking about how really CXOs, let's call it, are choosing their software vendor based on who has the best return on R&D. That's where the trend's going in purchasing decision. And guess what? The leading factor of that evaluation is now this EAP, or application platform, because the market is moving towards, hey, I need to be really nimble. I need to be able to be agile. And I need to be able to do all these projects at my speed without having all these debates on cost and timeline and all these different things. I need to be given the ability and let my people go. Back to the user profile. How can I enable them to create the user experiences and the innovation that ultimately they want to do? That's why this space is ultimately going to explode, in my opinion. But one thing you mentioned earlier, Massimo. So when you say, okay, I want to do something on related to security and compliance. I want to do something related to, then I move on to a phase 2 with ML. Then I move on to, advanced analytics or whatever it may be, right? Or IPA, intelligent process automation. How does a company how do they avoid still that clash, right? I want to be agile. Does the platform solve for that, or am I still buying separate things, right?
No, that's why I think what Olga was saying, it's absolutely true. We're seeing that as well. You avoid or you manage risk by saying, hey, by the way, I implemented the ERP, runs the most important business processes. Oh, guess what? There is a platform behind that exposes this business process, and I can innovate in different ways, in different areas, right? So instead of getting something from outside and try to plug it in and make it work, and it will never work. So to me, one of the things, coming back what you guys were saying, it has to happen in the cloud. It doesn't matter if it is cloud or not. The reality is, in the cloud, in multi-tenant, you have the full power of the computers. You have infinite scale. That's very important. Infinite scale. But guess what? Now, if your vendor can give you an update every month, you get an update and everything works, but you get new functionality and new innovation, right? And that's without any risk, because it comes with the subscription, those updates and those new innovation. And so you can take now this new functionality and use it and plan a new project and do it. And the rest is still running. It's there. It's running. And so you grow together with the software vendor. We call it no customer left behind, but not per se on premise, but even in the cloud, our vision is a view that every customer will innovate and come with us. We are at the same pace. It's not that a software vendor is up there for a year or 2 years and you are behind. No, you grow with us. Right. And what I love is what we are doing, Rick, with your team is we do what we call the spotlights, right? So this is what we should work with. Agile CIOs says, okay, I've just done my ERP and I'm done. I'm ready for phase 2. What could be a spotlight innovation that I can pick on it, right? So we advise also the customers, and the CIO says, oh, you can do this and this depending on their business need and issues, right? So it's a collaboration between the Agile CIOs and us, or I would say the software vendor, to find the next spotlight. What would be the next project to do? But if you already have that foundation, it's easy. It's easy. You have it already, right? You turn it off and you use it. There is no installation. There is no integration. You turn it off and boom, you have it.
So I think what you're saying is it's one thing. It's a commercial strategy that lets you implement that culture, right? So you're selling you're buying into a technology culture with something like an application platform that allows you to do this, and everything's not a one-off anymore, right? Mm-hmm. But that's where I still think that we still have this clash to where, when I said earlier, the risk, is it risk or is it not? And I think that's where this transition that we're seeing in the market comes from.
Yeah, there is no risk here. There is because you already have the core piece running, adding innovation and operationally improve whatever functionality you add, either is around the data or ML, even process mining. We talked about a couple of podcasts ago. Process mining is becoming very, very important. It is manageable because the foundation is already there. 80% of the work is done already, and so you only need to work now and focus on the 20%. And that's where Agile and innovation is coming there. And then once you're done, you can go and start a new one, or even improve what you have done, the 20%, and do it even better, right? So the risk is much, much less, than before, And by the way, you're not managing servers or are you out of capacity, or are you scaling? That's all taken care for you.
I think that's a really interesting line of thought, because I agree with you. There's not a lot of risk there, but there's the perception of risk. And I think it comes down to cost versus value, or the perception or conflation of cost and value. So if something's going to cost me more, then there better be a lot of value. And if it's going to cost less, I'm going to get less of it. And obviously we see when that cost curve climbs too high, then people are like, well, can we get 80% of what this product is able to do? But, by selecting a cheaper option or alternative.
Yeah.
But I think what's really, really interesting about what you're saying, Massimo, is that there is this perception of risk. And I think this is actually something that, is actually good to address as the elephant in the room, which is subscription software versus perpetual licensing. Because one of the challenges that people have a hard time kind of wrapping their mind around is, okay, I'm going to, instead of paying X amount of dollars per year, I'm going to pay a less amount on a yearly basis, but over 5 or 10 years, I will have spent more money with this company than if I had implemented on-prem, right? So that's the elephant in the room. And I think before I continue that thought, just think about if you were to quantify how many movies, how many TV shows, how much content have you consumed on things like YouTube and Netflix, right? Maybe we'll say Netflix, right? Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, whatever it is that you use, right? And if you were to actually assign a dollar cost to every single piece of content that you watched on there, would you have spent $10,000 over the last 5 years watching all these movies? No. But I will absolutely pay $10.99 every single month to get access to that catalog, right?
Exactly.
So will I have spent more money over the long term given the amount of content that I've consumed? Yeah. But I'm exposed to a lot more content that I never would have paid for or touched had I not actually had the benefit of this subscription service. So when we bring it back around to cloud update cadence and so on, yeah, are you spending more money over a given event horizon over a period of time? Yeah, there's no ducking that. It's not an uncomfortable situation. But put aside cost, because this is a value discussion or value proposition. What are you now able to do to drive higher up that value curve? Or take two companies, one that goes on-prem and one that gets monthly updates to their ERP, their processes, and their technology, right? All things the same. Which one actually gains a bigger competitive advantage over a 5-year event horizon than the one that went on-prem?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the cost might be a little higher, but are you also adding a value multiplier to the value that you're driving into the business that completely outpaces the cost by a factor of 10 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's a risk in air quotes. I'll bring back the air quotes from the very beginning from Rick, right?
But the risk, and Mike is amazing thoughts, absolutely. But the risk is, yeah, I pay less, but then I stay on the version that is 5 years old or 10 years old.
You diminish value generation.
And you diminish value. This is intangible because people think short term, like I'm paying now less, but they don't count that they're going to lose value over a number of years, right? So that is not counted, right? So, and that is where, yeah, I really love your Netflix. Would I pay all the movies like when you had the DVDs or the cassette? So you have always, to buy. Maybe only a collector of movie will buy all of them, but most of us are not collectors. But would I really pay for all the movies? No, I love the subscription. I can watch all the movies I want for one price. But, guess what? I saw a lot of movies.
But that's exactly how you manage that risk against that value. If you want to think about it in terms of, I love what you said, Mike, because we can have a whole nother segment on selling value, right? Because that's ultimately what everyone needs to get better at, is ultimately that. But I'm curious too. Maybe this is the last topic we'll go into as we're transitioning into this. Well, actually, let me hit on this for just a second. One thing I would caution against too, to Mike's example, is there's a lot of options out there too in this innovation space that's pure play. Massimo, you talked about this, right? If it's a integration provider, if it's an ML provider, it's whatever. That stuff, if you go research it, it's actually kind of expensive. But that's why I like that a lot of our customers say, well, I want to see underneath the hood. That's a progression of the buyer profile now too, is a lot of it's single tenant based technology.
Oh yeah.
And when you do that, you can't manage you can't manage the cost. You can't manage the TCO. So everything has the perception of innovation is really expensive. But back to Mike, your earlier point that you brought up, and we talked about multi-tenancy and what you get from there and the lower TCO. That's where we're moving towards, is that if you buy into something like an EAP, now you manage and diversify that risk so much more so that you can focus on that value. It's a really bad analogy, but it's just, it's almost like buying insurance against your innovation purchase, right? That's ultimately that's what you're looking at. Like I want to buy an insurance policy that says I can innovate at the speed at which I want to go, and I'm protected against having to go to some ML vendor that's going to cost me $500K just for a single seat just to get access to the technology. It's nuts, right?
Mm-hmm. I think people also, by the way, I'll also add there, I also think that the technologies are so cool and badass today that like the demos are amazing. The software looks so slick and everything like that. But I think the other problem, and this is a much, much bigger topic, is people conflate technology with products, right? So just because I have the tool doesn't mean I actually have the business case, the product, and right. So just like, Rust and Node.js and all these other things, right? Those are just tools. That is not the product unto itself. So I think that's one thing also that people need to kind of peel back, that little veneer, that little strip, that you get on new TVs and everything, right? So you can see what it really, really looks like in reality.
And that's what I'm an Apple fan, but I love Microsoft and Windows and Android and Google. But what I do like on Apple is that they really, if you take application is the iPhone and the platform is the iOS, it's all integrated, right? It's an all integrated experience, right? So if you take, the Android or the Windows, you have different laptops, so you may have more choice, but look at how much you have to maintain, support. You have so many combinations, you have so many supports, so many own work that you have to do, and then I'm not even forget about the viruses and all of that, right? And custom builds and custom. I get the whole ecosystem works really very well, and people can say, well, it's a closed ecosystem, Apple. You can say it, but it's an innovative company, providing you the end-to-end, the hardware and the software working together. I always love that. And the same, if the hardware and the software has to work together, that's the same in the application space. You have the application and the technology works together. And the guys that build the best technologies are the guys that know why they want the technology, right? So because you're building an application, you know why you need this application, these technologies, and how to use them. You just build a generic tool, and it can do 1,000 things, okay, but that doesn't still fit the purpose. And that's why still Apple builds the best MacBooks they build the best OS or mobile OS, because they know why they build and then what they need for the hardware, right? For the laptops and the iMacs and the phones. And people say, oh, well, I don't like Apple. But it's just an example to give you that if you build technologies, you need to build because you know what product, Mike, what product you are building, and what applicability and application you're building. I think that's the best thing, And I've seen technology built by pure technology players. Not a lot of them have really been successful. And the most came from an applicability use case or an application or a product.
I feel like, just full disclosure, probably Massimo has bought 3 iMacs, 20 AirTags, and what else is in your checkout, in your basket right now? So he has a very vested interest in all this working together.
Maybe the new iPad as well.
All right. 1 or 2, a couple of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's going to be very important. So if I would be an Agile CIO, I would really look like if I buy an application. So let's say a lot of CIOs today that are confronted, like you say, hey, there is choice. There is Netflix, but I can have Apple Plus, right? Or I can have Amazon Prime. So there are many platforms where I can rent the movies. Should I be on one? Yeah, mostly mostly you use one, right? But at the same time, today, Agile CIO says, well, I have CRM from another vendor, HCM from another vendor, ERP from another vendor. They have maybe 3 ERP platforms with different maturity. So how do they deal that? But maybe we'll take care of in the next episode.
All right, guys, let's round this out. I've got one final question, and I'll kick it over to Mike for your thoughts on this one. So we've gone from buyer profiles and managing risk to agile development to ultimately multi-tenant software and how that fits into where we're going for the future. But I'm curious, what does this mean? Like we hear a lot, what can we provide out of the box, or what is out of the box, or how can we make that out of the box? Is that changing as well? What's your thought? What does out of the box mean to you, and where is that going?
Yeah, I think this is your final question, man.
Absolutely.
You want to finish in 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
What does out of the box mean? I mean, we've seen that in like the BI world for a long time, pre-canned templates and everything. And what it's not supposed to do is solve how to run your business in a day. What it is supposed to do is try and inform your business how these operations and analytics capabilities can work, and then customize, bake in, add that little bit of zhuzh and secret sauce that makes your company into these pre-canned reports, and customize it, update the dimensions. And we're seeing that now also in other spaces like machine learning, AI, chatbots, and so on. But what it does is, I think that out of the box means that you have a fully equipped platform as well as content that takes you a good segment of the way there into adopting and already being able to operationalize this stuff. And now you're focused on actually, how do we make this personal about our business? So out of the box in the future, do I ever think that we're going to have, an ERP that's purpose built for some hyper niche industry, in a specific country around the world or something like that? No, you're always going to have those types of situations. And even if you do have markets that you can go completely full out of the box, that company is going to say, no, we're different than the other guys, right? So everyone's always going to come at it from a different angle for out of the box. But I think addressing those micro vertical strategies and being able to deliver more content out of the box to enable people to then self-innovate or propel that innovation, that's, I think, where it's going to get stronger and stronger. And I think also the value and the depth of pre-canned analytics, because, I'll be honest, a lot of that stuff is kind of, garbage, right? Or has been garbage in the past. It's like, take a look at my sales dashboard. Isn't that pretty? But it has no intelligence whatsoever about what makes this business unique. I think we will start to see a lot more depth and character to out of the box content that we haven't seen before. And maybe a lot of that has to do with like profiling of the enterprise with AI and machine learning to actually customize and generate or auto create that out of the box content. I mean, you can come up with a lot of wacky ideas, but I do think it's going to get closer and closer to helping the business just get off the ground as quickly as possible. That was like, 10 seconds?
Yeah, I'm seeing this more and more, that it's more about the understanding and ability to account for the extensions that I need. Massimo, we've seen this a lot, right? Like companies are moving, even hardware companies are moving into, how can I have a software experience that now I provide for these sort of things, because the business models are changing. Now, how does my enterprise software help facilitate that sort of thing? And that's where this mindset is going, is like, I need to make it hyper specific to me and where my business is going, maybe even beyond industry specificity, I would argue, right? So I think as we've talked about this transition from buyer profile down into user profile, that user profile mentality means that you can't build one thing for everyone. So I would argue that the emphasis of like these composition or application platforms are fundamentally a part of those buying habits moving forward. Is it today? Maybe starting to transition that way. Certainly tomorrow. It's no doubt moving that direction. But guys, I really appreciate it. For our audience, let us know your feedback. If you've got any sort of sessions that you want us to go through, like, subscribe, hit us up. And guys, anything on our way out?
No, I'm just ready for food here.
The potatoes are boiling.
Potatoes are boiling.
Boring. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.
Go
Bye.
dogs.
There you go.